The morning sun rose slowly over the quiet countryside, painting the fields in gold and orange. Birds sang softly, and the sound of cows mooing came from far away. It was another simple day for James Carter, a hard-working black farmer who lived on the edge of a small town. James was in his early 40s. His skin was dark and rough from years under the hot sun. His hands were strong, with deep lines that showed a life of hard work. Every day, before most people even woke up, James was already in his fields, watering, plowing, feeding, fixing, and praying for good weather. He didn't have much, but he had something many people had lost: peace in his heart. He lived alone in a small wooden house with a tin roof. The walls were old, but the place was clean and smelled like fresh corn and soap. His wife had passed away years ago, and since then his only family was his land. That land was everything to him. He worked it with love. When it rained, he thanked God. When the sun burned, he didn't complain. He believed that if he worked honestly, good things would come someday, even if the world wasn't always fair. It had been a hard season. The rains came late, and pests destroyed part of his crop. But James didn't give up. He worked longer hours, borrowing his neighbor's tractor when his own broke down. And finally, after months of sweat and sleepless nights, his harvest came. He sold his crops, corn, peanuts, and vegetables, at the town market. The people there respected him. They knew James never cheated anyone. When others argued about prices, he stayed calm and fair. After a week of selling, he counted the money at night: $10,000. To most city people, it wasn't much. But for James, it was everything. He placed the money carefully in a brown leather bag, the one his late wife had given him. He planned to deposit it in the bank. He had never trusted banks before, but now he wanted to save for something important: a new tractor, maybe even a water pump. He was tired of working with old tools and wanted to make his farm better. That night, before sleeping, he sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The moon was bright, and the wind moved gently through the fields. He looked at the stars and whispered, "Tomorrow I'll put this money safe. Then maybe I'll start again." His voice was soft, filled with quiet hope. The next morning, James woke up early as always. He bathed in cold water, put on his cleanest clothes, a faded blue shirt, brown pants, and his old boots. He brushed the dust off his hat and took the leather bag in his hands. He smiled and whispered to himself, "Let's go, old friend. Time to make you safe." He locked his door, climbed into his old pickup truck, and started the engine. The truck coughed a few times before coming to life. It was slow and noisy, but James didn't mind. The road to the city was long, filled with turns and bumps. As he drove, he passed green fields, small shops, and children waving from the roadside. He waved back with a smile. He was in a good mood. Today felt like a step forward, a sign that his hard work meant something. When he finally reached the city, everything looked different. The streets were busy, cars rushed by, and people walked fast with phones in their hands. James parked near the big white building that had shiny glass windows, the central bank. He had been here once before, but only to ask for directions. He took a deep breath and held the bag tightly. His heart beat faster. He wasn't afraid, just nervous. As he walked inside, the cool air from the air conditioner hit his face. The floor shone like water, and he saw his reflection in it: dusty boots, simple clothes, and a calm face. Some people turned to look at him. A few smiled politely, but others whispered or gave him strange looks. James didn't say anything. He just waited quietly in line, holding the bag close to his chest. He looked around. The walls were white, the counters high, and the people behind them wore suits and ties. Everyone seemed so busy, typing, talking, and stamping papers. James stood still. His eyes were kind but tired. When his turn came, he stepped forward slowly, placing the bag on the counter. "Good morning, sir," he said politely, his voice humble. "I would like to deposit some money into an account." The man behind the counter, the bank manager, Mr. Clark, didn't look up right away. He was tall, wearing a dark gray suit, and spoke with a cold tone. James waited patiently, smiling softly. He had no idea that this moment, this simple deposit, would soon turn into something shocking. Something that would make everyone in the bank stop and watch. Something that would change his life and the manager's motor forever. Mr. Clark sat behind his polished wooden desk inside the central bank, feeling proud as always. He liked how people greeted him with fake smiles and called him sir. He liked the power, the way his words could make customers nervous or grateful. To him, this job wasn't about helping people. It was about showing control. That morning, he was already in a bad mood. His coffee was cold, his boss had sent him a warning email, and his new tie had a small stain. So when he saw a man in dusty clothes step into the bank, he frowned without even knowing who it was. He didn't see a hard-working farmer. He only saw someone who didn't belong in his perfect bank. The farmer, James Carter, waited quietly with a soft smile. He stood straight, holding his old leather bag with care. When his turn came, he walked to the counter with calm steps and said politely, "Good morning, sir. I'd like to deposit my money, please." Mr. Clark finally looked up. His eyes scanned James from head to toe, the simple shirt, the worn boots, the rough hands. He smirked. "You want to deposit money here?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. James nodded, still calm. "Yes, sir. I worked hard for this. I'd like to open an account." Mr. Clark leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen. He spoke loudly so others could hear. "You people always come in with stories. Do you even have an ID?" James reached into his pocket and handed him a card.
"Here it is, sir."
"My ID and my farm papers." Mr. Clark looked at the ID but barely read it. He tossed it on the counter like it was nothing. He looked at the bag in James's hand and said sharply, "What's inside? Coins? Small bills? You think we count that kind of money here?" The people nearby started to look over. Some shook their heads. Others whispered quietly. James stayed polite. "It's $10,000, sir. From my harvest." Mr. Clark's eyes widened for a moment, but instead of respect, his pride got stronger. He laughed. "10,000? From farming? Don't lie to me." His voice echoed through the hall. Everyone could hear. James's hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from anger he was trying to hold back. "Sir," he said softly, "I don't lie. Every dollar here is honest work." But the manager didn't care. He grabbed the bag roughly and opened it. Inside was a stack of clean counted cash. Still, Mr. Clark sneered. "You think this money is real? Where'd you steal it from?" Then in one cruel motion he dumped the money on the floor. Bills scattered everywhere, floating down like broken leaves. The sound filled the room. The quiet gasp of customers. The rustle of money hitting the floor. James froze. His heart felt heavy. For a moment he couldn't speak. He looked at the cash he had worked months for, lying in the dirt at his feet. Mr. Clark crossed his arms proudly. "Pick it up. If you want to play rich, clean your mess first." He turned away, smirking. People in line whispered. A few recorded the scene with their phones, but no one spoke up. James slowly bent down, picking up each note with shaking hands. His eyes were wet, but he didn't cry. His pride was strong and stronger than the insult. He whispered to himself, "Stay calm, James, don't lose yourself over him." Just a few steps away, a young woman named Sarah stood frozen behind another counter. She had seen everything. Her face turned red with anger. She had worked under Mr. Clark for a year and had seen his arrogance many times. But this was too much. Her hands clenched into fists under the table. "Sir," she said quietly, "you can't treat customers like that." Mr. Clark turned to her with a cold smile. "Stay out of this, Sarah. This man doesn't belong here." Sarah wanted to shout, but she remembered the cameras in the bank. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "He'll answer for this." "Just wait." James finished picking up the last of his money. He stood up slowly, his head high. He looked directly at Mr. Clark and said in a calm, firm voice, "You may wear a suit, sir, but that doesn't make you a better man." The words hit like a quiet storm. For the first time, Mr. Clark didn't know what to say. He waved his hand dismissively, pretending not to care. "Security, show him out," he ordered. But before anyone could move, Sarah reached for her phone. She had already sent a quick message to her regional supervisor, Mr. Dawson, a man who was known for fairness. She wrote, "Urgent, manager mistreating customer. Threw cash on floor. Please come now." Outside, through the glass doors, James walked toward his truck, holding the bag tightly once again. His heart was heavy, but his spirit was not broken. He looked back once more at the bank and whispered, "God sees everything." Inside, Sarah's phone buzzed. A short reply came from Mr. Dawson. "I'm on my way. Keep him there." And in that quiet moment, as the air inside the bank turned still, none of them knew that within the next few minutes, The arrogant manager would face his biggest lesson yet. The air inside the central bank grew heavy after the incident. Some customers had already left, whispering to each other about what they just saw. Others pretended not to notice, afraid to get involved. But one thing was clear. Everyone felt that something wrong had just happened. Mr. Clark stood behind the counter, acting like nothing had occurred. He fixed his tie, straightened his papers, and spoke to the next customer as if he hadn't just insulted a man's dignity. But deep down, a part of him enjoyed the silence. He liked the feeling of control, of being feared. "Next," he shouted coldly. No one moved. The line was frozen. People didn't want to go near him after what he had done. Sarah, the young teller sitting a few desks away, looked at him with disgust. Her hands shook slightly as she typed fake numbers into her computer. She wasn't working, she was just waiting. Waiting for something to happen. Waiting for someone brave enough to speak up. Outside through the glass doors, James stood near his old truck. He sat inside quietly, the leather bag resting on his lap. The sound of the bank's air conditioner hummed faintly from behind the glass walls. His eyes stared at the building, the place where his honesty had been insulted. He remembered his wife's voice from years ago. "James, never let anyone make you feel small. You were made for good things." He took a slow breath and looked at his rough hands. They were cracked and dirty from the soil, but they were strong. Hands that grew food, not trouble. He thought about just driving away and forgetting everything. But something inside him said, "No, not this time." Back inside, Sarah noticed movement near the door. Her eyes widened. James was walking back in. His steps were steady, his face calm, but his eyes carried quiet fire. The room went silent again. Even the sound of typing stopped. James walked straight to the counter and stopped in front of Mr. Clark. He didn't shout. He didn't raise his voice. He just spoke with simple, steady words. "Sir," he said, "I came here to trust your bank. I came here to put my hard-earned money in safe hands. But you threw it on the floor like trash. You disrespected me, not just as a customer, but as a man." Mr. Clark chuckled coldly, crossing his arms. "I don't need a lecture from someone who smells like a barn," he said, loud enough for others to hear. A few gasps came from the crowd. One old woman whispered, "Shame on him." But Mr. Clark ignored them. He leaned closer to James and said, "If you want to complain, go somewhere else. This is my bank and I decide who's welcome here." James looked straight into his eyes and said softly, "No, sir. This bank doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the people." The manager's smile faded. The quiet power in James's voice made him uneasy. He didn't like that calm strength. It made him feel small. So, in his anger, he stepped out from behind the counter. He pointed at the door and shouted, "Get out! You and your dirty money, out!" The sound echoed in the room. Some people stood up. A mother held her child close. Sarah couldn't stay silent anymore. She rose from her chair and said firmly, "That's enough, Mr. Clark." Everyone turned to her. Her voice trembled, but her courage grew with every word. "You humiliated a good man in front of everyone. You don't deserve that position." Mr. Clark turned red with rage. "Sarah, sit down or you'll lose your job." But she didn't. She lifted her phone. "Then I'll lose it with dignity," she said. "I already called the regional supervisor. He's on his way." The room went dead silent. For the first time, Mr. Clark's fake confidence cracked. He tried to laugh it off. "Oh, you called him? For what, a farmer's drama? He won't care." But even as he spoke, a black SUV stopped outside the bank. Through the glass doors, everyone saw a tall man in a suit step out. It was Mr. Dawson, the regional supervisor. He had a calm but serious face, the kind of man who noticed everything without speaking much. He walked in slowly, eyes scanning the room. "Good morning," he said quietly. "I was nearby when I got a call." He looked at Sarah. "What's going on here?" Sarah pointed toward James. "Sir, this man came to deposit his savings. The manager," she hesitated, her voice shaking, "threw his money on the floor." Gasps filled the room again. Mr. Dawson's face turned hard. He looked at James, tired eyes, honest face, hands still holding the leather bag. Then he turned to Mr. Clark, who was sweating now. "Is that true?" he asked coldly. Mr. Clark stammered, "Sir, it's a misunderstanding." The man, he was causing a scene, but Mr. Dawson wasn't listening. He looked down at the floor, one stray bill still lying there, and picked it up slowly. He held it in front of Mr. Clark and said, "You threw this on the floor?" The manager tried to speak, but no words came out. Everyone was watching. Mr. Dawson's voice was calm, but every word cut deep. You don't throw people's dignity on the floor. You don't judge a man by his clothes or color. Not in this bank. Not under my name. The room stayed silent. Mr. Clark's face turned pale. He realized the moment he thought he was powerful was the moment he destroyed his career. And as James stood quietly, the truth finally began to shine in the open. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't fought back with anger. But his calm strength had done something louder than shouting ever could. The people inside the bank knew it. Sarah knew it. And now Mr. Dawson knew it too. The storm of disrespect was ending, and justice was about to begin. The bank was silent. No one dared to move. The sound of Mr. Dawson's shoes echoed on the marble floor as he walked closer to the counter. Every step he took made Mr. Clark's heart beat faster. The manager tried to fix his tie again, pretending to be calm, but sweat rolled down his neck. He forced a fake smile. "Sir, I can explain everything." This man, Mr. Dawson raised his hand, stopping him. "Not a word," he said quietly, but his voice carried power. He looked around the room. Who saw what happened here? At first, no one spoke. People looked at each other nervously. Some lowered their heads, afraid of getting involved. Then from behind her desk, Sarah slowly stood up. Her face was pale, but her eyes were strong. "I saw it all, sir," she said firmly. "From the start," Mr. Dawson nodded. "Good, tell me." Sarah took a deep breath. Her voice trembled a little, but she didn't stop. The farmer came in politely. He waited in line like everyone else. He wanted to deposit his savings. But Mr. Clark, he insulted him. He said ugly things about how he looked, about his clothes, and even about his money. Mr. Dawson's eyes darkened. "Go on." "He threw the man's cash on the floor, sir," she continued, her voice rising slightly. "Right in front of everyone." The farmer didn't shout. He didn't fight. He just picked it up quietly. "I couldn't stand it anymore, so I called you." A whisper moved through the crowd. People nodded quietly, confirming her words. One old man spoke up. "It's true. I saw it too." A young woman added, "He didn't deserve that." The farmer was polite. Mr. Dawson looked around the room again. He saw honesty in their faces. He turned toward Mr. Clark. "You heard them. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Mr. Clark's voice cracked. "Sir, I didn't mean to insult him. I was under stress." Mr. Dawson cut him off sharply. "Stress doesn't give you permission to disrespect another human being." The words hit hard. Mr. Clark's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked smaller now, not like the powerful man he pretended to be, but like a man who finally realized what he had done. Meanwhile, James stood quietly near the corner, his old leather bag still in his hand. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. He had faced humiliation before in life, but never like this. Still, he didn't wish harm to anyone. He only wanted respect. Mr. Dawson turned to him. "Sir, what is your name?" "James Carter," he replied softly. Mr. Dawson nodded. "Mr. Carter, I am deeply sorry for what happened here today. No one deserves to be treated this way. Not in my bank, not anywhere." James gave a small nod. "Thank you, sir. I only came here to put my money in a safe place. I never thought it would turn into this." His words were calm, but they carried pain. Mr. Dawson looked at the cash on the counter, the same money that had been thrown to the floor. He picked up one bundle and said quietly, "This money is clean. It's honest money. It was earned by hard work, and we will treat it with respect." He placed the money carefully in a new envelope and handed it to Sarah. "Count this and open an account for Mr. Carter. I'll sign the papers myself." Sarah smiled gently. "Yes, sir." The people in the bank began to whisper again, but this time it wasn't gossip. It was admiration. Someone said softly, "That man deserves a medal." Another whispered, "God bless that farmer." As Sarah processed the deposit, Mr. Dawson faced Mr. Clark one last time. "Pack your things," he said coldly. Mr. Clark's face turned white. "Sir, please. Give me one more chance," but Mr. Dawson shook his head. A bank manager should protect the dignity of customers, not destroy it. He took off his glasses and looked him straight in the eye. "You're fired. Effective immediately." The words were sharp, final, and echoed through the quiet hall. Everyone heard them. Everyone saw the fall of the arrogant man. Mr. Clark's lips trembled. He tried to speak, but no words came. He picked up his name badge, his papers, and his coat. As he walked out, his shoes made no sound. The confidence that once filled his steps was gone. He didn't look back. When the door closed behind him, a soft cheer rose from the customers. Not loud, but filled with relief, like justice had finally arrived. Sarah turned to James and handed him his receipt. "Your account is ready, sir," she said with a warm smile. "And your money is safe now." James took it carefully and smiled back. "Thank you, young lady. Not for the account, but for standing up when no one else did." Tears filled her eyes. "You deserve respect, sir." "Everyone does." Mr. Dawson stepped closer. "Mr. Carter, we owe you more than an apology. We owe you change." He extended his hand. James shook it slowly, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time: equality. The people in the bank clapped quietly, not for a show, but out of genuine respect. James smiled humbly, nodded to everyone, and walked toward the door. As he stepped outside, sunlight touched his face. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Lord. Justice still lives." Inside the bank, Sarah stood by the counter, watching him leave. She wiped a tear and whispered to herself, "One man's calm can change the world." The moment became a memory everyone in that bank would never forget. The day a humble farmer taught a proud man what true respect means. The moment Mr. Clark walked out of the bank, silence filled the air again. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then slowly, people began whispering, their voices filled with surprise and relief. Mr. Dawson stood still near the counter, his expression serious but calm. He had seen many things in his career: fraud, theft, arguments, but never something that broke his heart like this. A man's pride had been thrown on the floor, not his money. Sarah sat quietly at her desk, her hands still shaking. She looked at Mr. Dawson, unsure whether to feel proud or emotional. James Carter stood near the entrance, holding his deposit slip like a medal. It was just a piece of paper, but for him it meant justice. He had walked into that bank as a stranger and walked out as a symbol of dignity. Outside, the afternoon sun shone brightly. James stood by his old pickup truck, staring at the city around him. Cars passed, people rushed, but for him time moved slowly. He leaned against the door of his truck and closed his eyes. Memories from his life played in his mind like a movie. His wife's smile, his small farm, the days when he worked from sunrise to sunset just to make ends meet. He remembered the times people looked down on him because he was poor, because he was a farmer, because of the color of his skin. But today felt different. For once, someone had stood up for him, not because he was rich or powerful, but because he was right. Inside the bank, Mr. Dawson called a short meeting with his staff. Everyone gathered quietly near the counter, still shaken from what had happened. Mr. Dawson spoke slowly but firmly. "Let today be a lesson for all of us," he said. "No matter who walks through these doors, rich, poor, black, white, farmer, or businessman, every person deserves the same respect." The staff nodded. Some looked guilty, others emotional. Sarah bit her lip, fighting back tears. Mr. Dawson turned to her. "Sarah, you did the right thing. Not many people have the courage to speak up when they see wrong." Sarah smiled softly. "Thank you, sir. I just couldn't stay silent." He nodded. "You made this bank proud again." Meanwhile, the news had already started spreading. A customer had recorded part of the scene on their phone. The moment when the manager threw the money and the farmer picked it up silently. By evening, the short clip was on social media. People began sharing it with words like disgraceful, racism still exists, and justice served. Comments flooded in. That farmer has more dignity than the manager ever had. Bless that man for his patience. Respect to the supervisor who stood up for what's right. The video went viral overnight. By the next morning, everyone in town knew the story of James Carter, the humble farmer who was disrespected, and then respected again. That evening, as the sun set behind the fields, James returned home. He parked his truck near the barn and sat quietly on the porch. The air was cool, filled with the smell of wet earth and fresh grass. He took off his hat, wiped his forehead, and smiled faintly. He didn't care about fame or attention. All he wanted was peace. The peace that comes when truth wins without shouting. His neighbor, an old man named Henry, came walking down the road with a newspaper in hand. "James," he called out. "You're in the news, boy." James laughed softly. "News? What for?" Henry grinned and handed him the paper. Right on the front page was a photo of James standing inside the bank, calm and quiet, with the title, "Farmer's Dignity Restored After Manager's Disrespect, Justice Served." James stared at the picture for a while, then smiled humbly. "I didn't want to be famous, Henry. I just wanted respect." Henry nodded. "And you got it, son. You showed the world that silence can be stronger than shouting." Back in the city, Mr. Dawson sat in his office late that night, watching the same video online. He felt proud but also thoughtful. He picked up his phone and called Sarah. "Sarah," he said, "I want you to know something. Today wasn't just about a bank. It was about humanity. Thank you for standing for what's right." Sarah smiled through the phone. "Sir, I only did what anyone should have done." Mr. Dawson sighed. "If only everyone thought like you." He hung up and looked out of the window. The city lights glowed below, but his mind was far away, thinking about a farmer, a man who taught an entire bank the meaning of respect. As for Mr. Clark, the ex-manager, he sat alone in his car in the parking lot, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The same reflection he once admired now looked empty. He had power, position, and pride, but lost them all in a single act of arrogance. He whispered to himself, "Why did I do it? Why couldn't I just treat him like everyone else?" But it was too late. He realized that pride can blind a man faster than darkness. He started his car and drove away quietly, his expensive watch glinting under the streetlight, a small reminder of the big mistake he could never undo. Meanwhile, miles away on his small porch, James looked up at the stars. He whispered softly, "Thank you, Lord, for showing me that truth always comes out, even when the world tries to hide it." The wind moved gently through the cornfields, carrying his words into the night. And somewhere in the distance, the quiet truth kept shining, just like the stars above his farm. Morning sunlight spread over the city like gold. The bank doors opened early, and people gathered outside, not to withdraw or deposit money, but to talk about what had happened the day before. The story of James Carter, the black farmer, had already become a local legend. Everyone in town was talking about him, the man who stayed calm when insulted, the man who earned justice without raising his voice. Inside the bank, things felt different. The air was lighter, quieter, and more respectful. Even the tellers, who once only cared about speed and numbers, now spoke to customers with warmth. Mr. Dawson's speech the previous day had changed something deep inside them. But for Mr. Dawson himself, the work wasn't done. He sat in his office early that morning, staring at a folder marked Incident Report Central Branch. He had already sent a copy to the head office. He wanted everyone in the banking system to know what had happened and why it would never be allowed again. Meanwhile, far away from the city noise, James woke up to the sound of roosters and morning wind. He stepped out of his small wooden house, breathing in the smell of wet soil. His farm looked peaceful, the corn leaves shining under the sun, the cows moving lazily near the fence. He felt proud. Proud not because people were talking about him, but because he hadn't let anger change who he was. He poured a cup of black tea, sat on his porch, and opened the newspaper again. This time the story was everywhere, not just in his town, but across the country. Headlines read, "Bank Manager Fired After Disrespecting Farmer." "Man of Dignity, the farmer who stayed calm in the face of hate." James smiled softly and shook his head. He whispered, "I never wanted attention. I just wanted fairness." Back at the bank, Mr. Dawson received a call from the head regional office. He answered politely. "Dawson speaking." A deep voice replied, "We saw the video, Dawson. We read your report. Excellent job handling the situation." "Thank you, sir," Dawson said, relieved. The voice continued, "We'd like to meet the farmer. We want to make things right, not just with an apology, but with real support." "Invite him back," Mr. Dawson smiled. "I will, sir." Right away, he hung up the phone, called Sarah, and said, "Prepare something special. Mr. Carter is coming back today." Sarah's eyes lit up. "You mean he's coming back here?" "Yes," Dawson replied, this time as an honored guest. A few hours later, a small pickup truck stopped in front of the bank. It was the same one from before, dusty but strong. James stepped out wearing his best shirt, clean but simple, and the same hat that had become his signature. As he walked in, people inside the bank stood up. Every staff member greeted him with respect. Even the customers clapped quietly, smiling at him. James looked surprised.
"What's all this?"
he asked softly. Mr. Dawson stepped forward, shaking his hand warmly. "Mr. Carter, today we wanted to thank you. You taught us something that no rule book could ever teach, humanity." James smiled humbly. "I didn't do much, sir. I just stayed calm." "That's exactly what made the difference," Dawson replied. "Your calm was louder than anger." He led James to his office, where Sarah had set up a small table with coffee, snacks, and a folder. On the folder was written, "Community Farming Support Program." Dawson opened it and explained, "We spoke to our directors. The bank wants to sponsor small farmers in this region. Better loans, fair treatment, and training programs. It will start with your name, Mr. Carter." James blinked in surprise. "My name?" "Yes," Sarah said, smiling. "It's called the Carter Initiative, for honesty and hard work." James looked at both of them, speechless for a moment. He finally said, "I don't know what to say. Thank you for turning something painful into something good." As the day went on, news reporters came to take pictures. One of them asked James, "Sir, what do you want to say to others who face disrespect like you did?" James looked into the camera and said calmly, "Don't fight hate with hate. Let your truth speak for you, because no one can silence truth forever." The reporters clapped. His words were short but strong, the kind of message that stayed in people's hearts. At that same moment, far away, Mr. Clark sat in his small apartment. He hadn't left his home since being fired. The TV in his living room played the news, showing James at the bank, smiling, shaking hands with Mr. Dawson. For a long time, Mr. Clark stared at the screen. Then he turned it off and buried his face in his hands. He realized that the man he had insulted had become a hero, while he had become the lesson. He whispered to himself, "I wish I could say sorry, but sometimes life gives no second chances, only lessons that stay forever." Back at the bank, as the sun set through the glass windows, Sarah stood near the counter watching James leave. He turned back one last time and waved at her. "Thank you for believing in me," he said. She smiled. "No, Mr. Carter. Thank you for reminding us what real respect looks like." As he walked out into the golden evening light, his reflection shone on the glass doors, not as a poor farmer anymore, but as a man of quiet victory. Justice had been done, not just in the firing of a manager, but in the way people's hearts had changed. That night, in his small farmhouse, James sat under the stars again. The wind moved gently through the crops. He whispered softly, maybe this was never about the money. Maybe it was about showing the world that kindness and patience still have power. And as the stars glimmered above his quiet fields, one thing became clear. Justice wasn't just served that day. It was remembered forever. The sun was low in the sky, coloring the fields in shades of gold and red. The soft wind brushed through the tall corn plants, making them sway gently like waves. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that comes after a long storm. James Carter sat on his porch sipping tea from his old metal cup. The same cup he had used for years, chipped but still strong, just like him. He looked out over his farm, smiling as he watched two young boys helping their father load sacks of grain onto a cart. Those boys reminded him of his younger days, full of hope, full of dreams. Life had not been easy, but now it felt different. Something had changed, not around him, but within him. A week had passed since the incident at the bank, and the story had spread far beyond his small town. People from nearby cities came to meet him. Some brought gifts, some brought cameras, but most brought words of admiration. Reporters called him the farmer who taught the world respect. Church leaders invited him to speak about patience and faith. Even school teachers told their students about him, how a humble man had changed hearts without raising his voice. But James stayed the same. He still woke up at sunrise, still worked in his fields, still ate his simple meals in silence. He didn't care about fame. He only cared about peace and honesty. One afternoon, Sarah and Mr. Dawson visited his farm. They arrived in a clean white Jeep and parked near the wooden gate. James, who was trimming the edges of his field, wiped his hands on a towel and smiled when he saw them. "Well, look who's here," he said warmly. "My city friends," Sarah laughed. "We missed your tea, Mr. Carter," James chuckled. "Then you came to the right place." He invited them to sit under the shade of a big oak tree. The air smelled of fresh earth and growing crops. Mr. Dawson looked around, impressed. "You built all this with your own hands?" he asked. James nodded proudly. "Every inch of it. My land, my sweat, my peace." As they drank tea together, Mr. Dawson handed him a document. It was neatly printed with the bank's logo on top. "What's this?" James asked curiously. Mr. Dawson smiled. "It's an official letter from the board. The Carter Initiative has been approved. It will help local farmers with fair loans, crop insurance, and modern equipment." James looked surprised. "That's wonderful news, sir." Dawson continued. "And we'd like you to be the face of it, the first farmer in the program." James's eyes widened. "Me? But I'm just a small farmer." Sarah shook her head. "You're more than that, Mr. Carter. You're proof that goodness still exists. People listen to you." For a moment, James was quiet. He looked at the letter again, then at the wide field stretching beyond the horizon. He smiled humbly. "If it helps others, I'll do it. Not for fame, but so no farmer has to feel small again." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Mr. Dawson extended his hand. "You have our respect, Mr. Carter. You've earned it." James shook his hand firmly. "And you have mine. Because respect is a two-way road." That evening, the three of them stood at the edge of the field as the sun began to set. The sky turned orange and pink, and the air filled with the soft sound of crickets. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that spoke louder than words. Sarah turned to James and said softly, "You know, when you walked into that bank, you changed more than a policy. You changed people." James smiled. "Sometimes all it takes is staying calm when the world wants you to lose your temper." Mr. Dawson nodded. "You didn't just earn justice, Mr. Carter. You earned respect, the kind that can't be bought, only given." Later that night, when the guests had left, James sat alone on the porch again. He looked up at the moon shining bright over his farm. The sound of the wind whispered through the leaves like a soft song. He thought about everything, the insult, the pain, the justice, and the kindness that followed. He realized something deep, that life has strange ways of teaching lessons. Sometimes you lose something small to gain something greater. He whispered softly, "Respect, that's the real wealth of life." His words floated into the quiet night, mixing with the sounds of the earth he loved so much. The next morning, a group of children came running to his gate. "Mr. Carter," one shouted, holding a school notebook. "Teacher told us about you." "You're a hero," James laughed. "A hero? No, I'm just a farmer. But you taught people to be kind," another child said proudly. James knelt down, smiling. "Then you remember this, all of you. Kindness is free. Give it to everyone, no matter who they are." The children nodded, their eyes shining. As they ran away, laughing and shouting, James watched them go, feeling proud, not of what he had done, but of what the world was learning. That evening, Sarah sent him a photo taken at the bank a week ago. In it, James stood quietly, holding his money, surrounded by people who had learned something that day. Under the photo, she wrote, "True respect is not given by fear, it's earned through grace." James smiled as he read it. He placed the photo on his wall next to his wife's old picture. He whispered softly, "You see, Mary? People are learning to be better." The wind blew gently, and the lamp beside him flickered as if agreeing, and so the story of James Carter, the humble farmer, spread far and wide, not as a tale of anger or revenge, but as a story of dignity, patience, and justice. He didn't shout, he didn't fight, but he won hearts across the world. Because true power doesn't come from pride or wealth. It comes from calm courage, gentle strength, and a heart that refuses to hate. That was his legacy. That was his respect, and it would live forever. In every field, every handshake, and every heart that chose kindness over cruelty.